This episode is with my good friend, my spiritual guide and co-creator, Danielle Grant. She is a magical human being, and if you're not familiar with her yet, you are about to be. Danielle and I talked through many great topics of her story, what led her on her spiritual journey, and where she's at today, and how she's influencing entrepreneurs in embracing the energetic space, getting out of the box on, programs and all the sales and marketing techniques that they're used to, and embracing the energy space to get the results that they desire in their lives. So you don't want to miss this episode. This truly is a special one. We had many reasons to cancel it in the beginning because we had about 40 minutes of technical difficulties, but we jumped on and it flowed and unfolded just as it was supposed to. And there's a lot of knowledge within and special messages. So I look forward to you listening to this episode and following along. Enjoy. Okay, so what I'm going to do before we dive in, Danielle, or before I even introduce you, is we both have hectic days, many things going on, and especially after the troubleshooting we just did, we are going to do 3 single breaths together and
Perfect.
just arrive to be present. Okay, so we'll start that in 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. And I hope anybody listening along joins us in that every single time, because it is a nice piece for us to arrive and be present during this chat. So today we have on Danielle Grant, who is one of many things, and this is usually the part of the show that I introduce and talk about accolades. But in this podcast, we speak to the human. And that's what I love is different. And Danielle has done many great things, but honestly, overall, she's just a wonderful, wonderful human. And every time we connect, and I'm even getting on a call with you, I have an amazing feeling in my being in anticipation of all our conversations. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mike. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. Very much received.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for some time. And before we dive in, what I would love to start at, because of course we know each other through a couple different outlets. We've done the cold plunge together. You've given me some wonderful spiritual guidance, and we're on the verge of co-creating a couple things together. But what I don't know, and what I think, many people could benefit from is a little bit about your story on what led you on your spiritual journey. Where did it all begin, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I love to share. And I love that you opened up this podcast by saying that you're speaking to the human first and foremost. And so as I share this story, I'm going to exclude the corporate aspect, so to speak, of this journey. For me, where it started, my awakening, first and foremost, which for the record, I didn't know I was having an awakening. I didn't know I was stepping into a spiritual higher aspect of myself, was 14 years old when I was ready to commit suicide. And the day before I was about to do it, a teacher I had known very well knew something wasn't right and asked me if I was okay. And in that moment, I said, no, I'm not. And I'm going home to take my life. And that is when, that's when my mom drove me down to the psychiatric ward here in Kelowna and would not leave the hospital until they admitted me, because at that time, it wasn't really something that people, it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't something that was accepted. And so they had said to her, we don't take kids that are just thinking about it. And she said, you don't know my daughter. She's not just thinking about it. Yeah, and so I didn't know that till years later either, that fact. But so that's where it started for me. I ended up getting spending 5 days in the psychiatric ward, and I remember looking out the window. And for anyone that's familiar with Kelowna or the Okanagan Valley, we have a beautiful lake, and our hospital just happens to be a block, literally just off the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And where the psychiatric ward was facing the lake. And I remember looking out at the lake, consistently asking myself, how did I honestly believe my life wasn't worth living for? And as we'll know in this conversation, we'll come to understand, and as you've come to understand, Mike, questions and reflections and curiosity unlocks higher aspects of ourselves. And by me unconsciously asking that question, not prompted by anybody in that space, but me being isolated by myself and asking that consciously from a higher power, I began to hear the unlock of all of the stories as to what was validating that reason for me. And that's when I started to go, there's something greater going on here. And no one is talking to me about this inner voice, and no one is talking to me about this. And that is really what it started for me. And so I share that because, again, I didn't know I was awakening, but that was the moment, because beyond that moment, I left the hospital and I actually started becoming obsessed with personal development because I wanted to know what this voice was. I wanted to know what this thing was that just unloaded every reason why. And so that is how I first got into this journey. That is my entry point.
That's wild. Thank you for sharing. What an amazing enlightenment right there, because how many people in this world are hearing that voice, are hearing that inner whisper, but not questioning it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? By just thinking, oh no, it's XYZ, or it's from a movie I watched, or it's from this or that, and not hearing a true call to look deeper.
I think that from my own experience, the reason why that's happening is it's really scary when you hear the truth. Mm-hmm. When I heard the reasons why I had created that story for myself, it was scary for me to understand that I was believing that to be true, and my ego didn't want to believe that to be true.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the actual meeting truth for the first time is so challenging for our ego that people run.
That's powerful. Meeting truth for the first time. And I would say at the age of 14 is a pretty young age to acknowledge that, to have that encounter of meeting truth, if you will.
Yeah, and I didn't know that's what it was at the moment, right? It took me years of studying personal development and then recognizing the personal development space was missing something. I still wasn't understanding what that voice was. And that's what tuned me into Buddhism. And that's when I met truth, is when I went, oh shit, this is the truth right here.
Wow. And so what in Buddhism, how were you following that path? Was it just a book you picked up, or were you just doing some research online?
Yeah, no. So at that time, I was getting books out of the library in Calgary. And also at that same time, I was disrupting my life. I dropped out of college. Everyone told me I wasn't going to do anything with my life. And again, that was me, another spiritual calling, right? And I found myself reading books on personal development. And I remember one day I was standing in the library and I went, there's got to be something else in here for me. I'm looking for guidance onto which book I need to find. And it was a Buddhism book, and I'd never questioned it. I just brought it home. I didn't really understand what I was reading, but I could have resonance with it. And so I just started becoming more and more curious about what that was. And also at the same time, which is interesting, I actually was in religion. I was into Christian religion. Around that same time, I'd also been making a decision to get baptized. So in my journey, you could see I was seeking truth. I was seeking something, right? So what was happening is I was in this religion while I was exploring Buddhism, and I was seeing the duality in it. And that's what started to get me to become more and more curious about Buddhism. And also at this time, I should mention, I was a closet spiritual person. Up until I actually created my business 5 years ago, no one knew that I did this because it was woo-woo. It was crazy. And you were out there if you talked about it. And so I never talked to anybody about this shit.
Wow.
And so that's kind of what got me into Buddhism. And then my Buddhism journey really opened up when I found myself in Thailand at 25 in Buddhist monks and just going, I belong here. This is my resonance right here.
That's so cool. I'm smiling during all this because I want to tell you my journey in comparison to that, if I could share briefly, because it's so wildly similar yet different, and
Yep.
sadly different. Because I can tell you, when I was in university, I took world religions. I read the Bhagavad Gita.
Yep.
And a friend and I were talking about it last week, and I was like, I couldn't tell you a word right now because I know what I was doing in university, and I wish I was at a more conscious level and looking for these things. I was absolutely spiritual, not as I am now, and I did still have a religious aspect to attached to an organized religion, but it was during a period that I was kind of shifting, and I was certainly not in that world at the time. And then of course I did the Thailand thing after university, but again, it was, maybe a little bit too much indulgence and time on the beach versus what I wish now looking back, maybe I was spending my time doing in what you did. So I love hearing that contrast, because I think a lot of people are the majority of people are probably on the path that I went through, right? And not looking beyond our ego and taking selfies at the top of a lookout point and doing all the silly things that we normally do at that age, right? And part of these discussions that we're having is to try to inspire the younger generation, of course. So I love hearing that. And it's truly what I wish most people chose and I had at a younger age, but my path did lead me to where I am. So
I want to touch on something in that, because what I didn't share in that was the amount of physical ailments I experienced between 20 and 25. And as much as I was on the journey that I just shared of exploring Buddhism and seeking truth and feeling resonance, I was still operating. Again, I didn't know at the time, but now I do. I was operating still in a 3D lower energy in my ego self. So while I was consuming this information, I wasn't willing to accept it. And what happened is at 19, I found myself in the hospital repeatedly for bleeding stomach ulcers. And they just said,
wow.
You're stressed out. And I thought, there's no freaking way. I'm 19 years old. I have like the best life. I'm from the Okanagan. There's no way, right? So whatever, I didn't really think too much of it. Again, at the same time, learning about Buddhism and all this stuff. But also in Buddhism, it doesn't talk so much about the energetic exchange. It doesn't really talk about energy per se. It talks, because it doesn't need to, because it's beyond that. So I didn't understand what that meant. And then as I kept getting sicker and sicker, and I got psoriasis, and time after time, doctors said, it's just psoriasis. And actually, they didn't diagnose me with psoriasis for the first 12 months. It was, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And that's when I became curious more so. That's when I really went, what is actually going on here? What is really going on? Because I am sicker than a dog, and these doctors have no idea what's wrong with me. What is happening? And that is right after that period. I found myself in Thailand. That's when I found myself at a Buddhist temple. And that's when I went, this is my truth. I belong here. And that's when I started accepting. And ever since then, my body has not been in that place. And I think that's important to share, because a lot of people look at their disease and they don't realize that it's an energy game, and they don't realize that they manifested it in this lifetime for them to awaken to it. And that is what I want people to really hear today.
Yes. Thank you. And that's a theme on last podcast we talked about as well, actually. So I love that this is coming up again, but from a different perspective, because it's so important, right? We all grow up thinking, oh, I'm sick, go to my doctor. Oh, I have a cold, I go to my doctor. And as I completely resonate with what you're saying, that we need to look outside of the box, right? And there's so much more to it. And doctors absolutely have a time and place, but in a lot of scenarios, there's more to be looked at than what's on the surface.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it took me questioning that system until I went, maybe there is something else out there. And what about all those woo-woo, natural, crazy people that everyone says it doesn't work? What are they talking about? And let me see what's going on there. And I know that that's what people are waking up to. And that is one of the reasons why we're having such a disruption right now in our medical industry, because there's so many people awakening to the natural reality that eventually we actually won't need that medical system to the capacity that it has been over the last 100, 200 years. And that's important for people to recognize too, because that could be scary and confusing at the same time.
Anytime there's a massive shift like that, right? It's of course there's going to be people standing their ground on either side, and for anybody in that profession to hear that that's a possibility, of course, they're going to be immediately reactive on standing their ground and fighting that.
Yeah. The good news is I have a client I was working with who's in the medical field, and he actually had me to consult with him to teach him mindset to help him understand it, because he wanted to bring this conversation to the medical world. And he was a gentleman who had connections and was pretty high up. And when we started doing our research, it was amazing how many people he found who were actually curious about what I had to say about this. And so that also made me realize that there's a lot of people in the medical industry who are trapped, because for a long time they were educated to not believe it to be true, but then they kind of found it, and then they found the truth in it, and then they were like, well, how do I give up my identity of being this medical professional and then come to the medical professional with the truth, right? So it's a very interesting time right now.
Absolutely. And of course, once you start to have those conversations and they start to have those conversations, it's amazing how you realize how many other people have been thinking it for so long, but not had the courage to step forward, right? And we've had that conversation, of course, as we all start to speak our truths. It's we attract it, right? Yeah. But a neat question around that is, because to so many people it is so new, right? And so what would you say to somebody that perhaps, has had an ailment for years or an illness, and they don't know where to turn, they don't know where to look? And we all know that Google is a scary rabbit hole if you head down that way. But what could someone do as a starting phase to say, I have chronic XYZ and I'm frustrated and I want to take a next step on that journey, that side of things?
Really great question, Mike. One of the things that I learned through Buddhism is the power of the ego mind and what that offers us. And so when you ask me that question, I don't want to go look at I'll say it right now, but go look at all the chakra systems and energy and quantum and Dr. Joe Dispenza, like, for sure, go look at all that. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is, watch a documentary like Heal. Watch a documentary that spotlights natural healing, so that you can actually introduce the concept to the ego mind, so that when you do watch that and then find those other modalities, your ego is working for you instead of against you, right? Because if we're talking about awakening to this information, you can't just abruptly be like, I'm going to heal myself in this energy thing that I've never believed to be true before. You have to show yourself that it is possible, and people have done it. And how did they do it? And what part of those healing journeys resonate with you?
Yes. So you got to open up the mind to it first. And when you're open, then you're open to receive and start to really bring those messages in.
They'll come either way. As soon as you tune on to something like that in a documentary, and this, you start to see these things surface in your reality. Natural healing modalities, more stuff about chakra and energy work. You just naturally start to see it in your reality because you're vibing with it, you're attracting it. And that's why I say it's best to introduce it, because then you actually just attract what you're a match for.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's. I mean, I resonate with that in a massive way. As you know, I've shared a bit of my journey, and I'll tell you, I did the Western traditional route, and all it did was deplete my being to almost a bag of bones. And mentally, I was not in a great state either. And it was the second that I committed to the spiritual journey and to a switch that I started to receive, and that I'm in the best shape I've been on this journey today because of that. And I know what my turning point was. I know it. I can pinpoint it. I could write a novel about it, but it's absolutely. So I think that's a great piece of recommendation for people to just start to watch, a documentary or look for other examples of people being healed in your space, because it will start to open you up to it being real.
The other thing I'd expand on right there is the word heal. We're moving away from the word heal because it's more of a linear 3D term, and we're actually just awakening to energy centers that have trapped emotions. And so, you're not healing any part of yourself, Mike, nor am I. We're awakening to aspects of us that are energetically misaligned with our highest version, right? We're not healing anything because we're not healing our physical self. We're awakening an energy that no longer serves us. That's like an expanded part of the conversation, right?
Absolutely. It's energy work. And I love that. How can you bring that to any more layman terms for someone that's new to the energy space?
Yeah. So we all know everything is energy. And I had mentioned something about the chakra systems, which naturally most people have started to see them in our society because they're everywhere. If everything is energy and we start to look at something like a chakra system that has 7 points running from the bottom of our spine up to the top of our head, we must know and understand that each of those points has their own kind of reality within them, which is what you learn in the chakra systems. And so each of those points holds a certain aspect of our life, right? So the crown holds our most enlightened self and our root holds our most physical self. When we talk about exploring where we're sick or how to understand energy more, it's really about understanding what that chakra point represents and then exploring that in your life. Meaning the root chakra is like basic needs and just I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm validated, I'm a human being, here I am. If you don't ever feel seen or heard or validated in your life, you're most likely going to have problems in your lower back, in, ovaries, erectile dysfunction, and so on, because it will work its way up those systems. So when we talk about layman's terms, to explore what those are in your life. Where don't I feel seen? Where don't I feel heard? Because that's what creates the energetic shift. Exploring those states is shifting the energy because everything is energy. So the minute you consciously explore something, you've introduced a different energy, which now allows it to become a different energy. The irony in this is that some people are going to listen to this podcast right now, Mike, and they're going to hear what we say, but they're actually not going to hear what we say. Mm-hmm. There's going to be people that right away are like, oh, I've been looking for this. And there's going to be people that are like, oh, I feel like I found my people. And that's what's crazy about you saying, can you explain this? It's like, sure. But the only people that are going to actually receive this are people that are on our vibe right now.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And that it was hard for me to even kind of position that question because I mean, obviously I completely understand what you're saying, but it's trying to introduce people into the verbiage, but at the same time, you're right. You can't even do that unless they're open to it and they're already ready, right? And then if they are, they'll be receiving it just as it is being delivered. So, absolutely.
I think what you're really alluding to there, though, is I don't have to explain anything to anybody, and nor do you, because it's the truth within all of us. Again, we just have to awaken a higher vibration to receive it. And then I don't have to explain it to you because you already know it to be true, if you're willing to look at it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and as we talk about the healing and everything along that, I mean, all of the capabilities to do so is within us.
Yeah.
Right. And that's again where we look outwards for all these answers, right? But they are right within us. It's looking inward that we need to do. And just when we're open to and receptive to the answers that we're able to heal. Yeah.
And personal development does a really good job of keeping us out of that space because it kind of gives you just enough to feel like you're developing your person, your human, but it doesn't give you the point that unlocks the truth. You don't necessarily find that. And even like, for instance, ego is the enemy. An ego would be the same ego in Buddhism. However, the way it's received in the book doesn't allow that expansion. Right. So people are like, I'm reading personal development, I'm doing it. It's like, okay, but are you actually making changes? No, you're not, because your changes come from you embodying a higher version, and personal development has never been designed to do that. That's what spiritual development is for. Yes. Personal development is about your human. And so that's the trap people get in, is like, well, I'm reading those books. It's like, you need to change the books you're reading, right? Yeah. That's how you unlock energy. That's how you unlock another dimension is books. Is wisdom, because it's energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love this conversation because it does go a route that I wanted to discuss eventually. And of course, we didn't open up about the corporate world too much in the beginning, but it's of course a space that we both play in. And I love how I play with it in my world today. And of course, how how you've introduced it in your world as well, because previously you were you had a mindset mastery course. So that was, I can only presume, I wasn't in it, but I can only presume it was more based around strategy and programs, probably some analytics and numbers and tracking and things like that, versus now you're in a full on energy space, which I love, but is I would definitely say still very, very new to the corporate space. And I know you deal with more so entrepreneurs who would be a little bit more open-minded, or so I'd hope. But, to take something like that and bring it into a space that is so structured, first off, I guess I got to ask, how did your courage evolve along that journey to say, I can just no longer do this, right? Because I'm sure you hit a breaking point. And then how has the journey been in introducing it to that space of people who could be so in the box and been doing, a certain way for so long?
Yeah, great question. Now, just to clarify, you asked me specifically in the decision to let go of Mindset Mentor or the decision to move away from the corporate world?
More so to let go of Mindset Mentor.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, it was rooted in, let me just rewind. I had always wanted to bring the spiritual information in my entrepreneur journey, but because there wasn't as many people welcoming it, I was met with a lot of resistance from people that I respected. And so I learned very quickly in my journey, I am obviously not ready to ascend beyond people's disbelief in myself. And if I succumb to their disbelief, I won't have a business anymore. So how do I manage still moving myself forward as an entrepreneur and figuring out how to run this thing and do this thing, but not leaning into the spiritual truth, which is interesting because I really wanted to do that at the beginning, right? Yeah. But I knew that if I didn't, I would give up. And I was like, no, you can't do that. So what's the in between? And that's kind of how I settled on your Mindset Mentor, which was obviously spiritual because it's consciousness, subconscious, and ego. But the whole time I was creating my current company, the Spiritual Room, side by side, quietly, right? No one knew. And for 2 years, I had a banner at the bottom of my website saying the Spiritual Room coming soon. And I every time I presented it, I was still met with disbelief. And I knew I wasn't ready to deliver it because I was responding that way. I was like, oh, I'm not ready. People are blah. But about a year and a half ago now, I really started to hear this voice inside that said, this isn't what you're here for. And what you actually have been doing over the last little while is you've been figuring out how to actually step into this truth and this power and have the fundamentals set up. And I was like, okay, I hear you say that, but I still feel like I'm not ready. And I had invested $15,000 to move your Mindset Mentor forward, which was serving entrepreneurs in business and mindset. And after I'd made that investment, I was 6 weeks into the program and I started to get very sick. I started to lose complete mobile function. My back completely went out and I just deteriorated, similar to you, like bit by bit by bit. But I was more aware by this point because I was like, okay, I'm not sick. I'm having some sort of dysfunction in my energy field about what I'm doing and what I probably should be doing because I had already heard the voice. And honestly, it took me not listening to myself and my higher self completely wiping me out, bedridden for almost like basically 3 full months and almost 9 months completely, for me to actually say, I will surrender to this. But it was the same experience I had that I referenced it when I was 19 or not even 19, when I was 25. And in the moment I surrendered to the spiritual truth, I awoke to everything at 25. The minute I surrendered to the fact that I wasn't listening to my higher self and I was pushing something that everyone else thought I should do versus what I was here for, was the minute everything switched. It became easy to let go of your Mindset Mentor. I was certain of it. I was confident I was going to the Spiritual Room and I knew the time was now. So it was a really difficult thing for me to do. And everyone asked me why and judged me why I let go. It was a profitable business. But I was like, no, this is what everyone does, is they're so afraid to actually do the thing that scares them. Like, fuck, that's going to be me, Yeah. And that was it. That was the moment where my body literally put me on bed rest. And of course I went to the hospital and did the whole doctor shit. And they were like, oh, it's myofascial pain syndrome. If you look up myofascial pain syndrome, it's inflamed muscles. Well, how do muscles get inflamed if we're energy? Energy is trapped, right? Like, So for me, it was like I had to surrender to the fact that I was ignoring my path again. And I surrendered and I let it go. And it's been almost a full year and I could not be happier.
Crazy. That is amazing. I mean, for you to be aware of that, right? Most people would keep themselves in that, right? And again, they would do the traditional thing and try to figure it out. But for you to have that awareness and then for you to step into it and have been better since only proves exactly what you just said, right?
Yeah. Well, and the expanded part of that conversation, which I'll bring to your podcast because you're interested in this. What I actually experienced was my crystalline light body, which if you look into crystalline light body, when you ascend from the fourth dimension to the fifth dimension and fifth dimension beyond, you start to embody higher states of consciousness, which is just energy, higher states of energy, which are vibrate at higher states. So what had happened is I was actually activating my crystalline light body, which meant my whole entire aura and energetic body was upgrading because I was willing to surrender. Mm-hmm. And that was my soul saying, here's your gateway to the next level now. You have passed. You did what you needed to do. You surrendered. You see the truth. We're upgrading your light body because it's time. As soon as you surrender, you will embody this higher aspect of yourself. But it took me 4 months to integrate it, right?
Yes.
So that's the expanded part of it. It wasn't just me surrendering to your mindset mentor. It was actually me surrendering to a lower vibrational aspect of myself and embodying the highest aspect of myself, which is what you see today.
Yeah. So you almost had two choices. You go back and you regress, or you continue on the path of enlightenment and stepping into your truth and exactly what you're meant to do.
Yep.
It's amazing.
And people all over are going to be experiencing this. Everyone's going to experience this now because of the state of consciousness. So people who are listening to this will most likely be finding themselves in these experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I truly think right now, more than ever I've seen in my lifetime anyways, there's a massive awakening happening right now, right? And we're going to see a divide of some people are going to completely turtle on it and run from it. And others are going to step into it powerfully, and some are going to teeter for a little while in between, right? And just try to peek behind the curtain. But I can tell you,
yeah,
in what I've seen, many who peek behind the curtain can't go back, right? It's powerful.
Because of energy, you access a higher state of energy. Your being naturally doesn't want to go back. I think I want to share something, though, that you just brought up. Mm-hmm. The reality of it is, because duality exists in our universe, right? Yin and yang, positive and negative, light and dark. Yeah. Because that exists, we in this lifetime won't see all of the people waking up, because there still has to be duality on Earth. That's just why we're here, is to experience duality. So there's still many people, sure, we could throw out a number, 1/3, that are never going to access higher states of consciousness right now.
In this lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Never. And for many, probably hundreds more lifetimes, because that's how this works. So yeah, and that's why we also have to respect people that aren't awakened, because it's not their fault. It's just their journey that they're on. And we as awakened people, knowing what this is, have to respect that. And in that moment that we can do that for those people, we actually allow them the opportunity to awaken. Because we're not
in understanding that, you mean?
Yes, because we're not judging them. We're not saying you don't know. We're not saying you're stupid. We're not saying, why can't you look at this? We're just neutral. Hey, cool. That's cool. Yeah, no problem. That allows them to maybe become curious to awaken.
Yeah. Yeah, I love you bringing that up, because of course, I've seen that on my own journey, right? And I've seen it with friends that are on the similar journey, where of course, immediately when we see and we awaken, or we start to, and we go down the path, we just want to bring our loved ones. We just want to bring our friends, right? We've seen the brightness and the light and feel how amazing it is. And that's a first reaction always, right? But I think what you brought up is so important, because we need to understand that we can't do that. We can light the way, we can lead by example, we can walk our path, and we can hope for the best, and hope that some join us along the way, but we certainly can't force it. We're just really breaking that bond and creating trauma almost with those individuals. So it's, I think that's really important what you brought up there.
Yeah. And same as what you just said there, we have to be the light. When we be the light and we be the best versions of ourselves, because everything is energy and we're connected as a collective consciousness, again, that allows people to awaken, because you're just being your best version. You're being a high vibe. You're being the light that's allowing the darkness within them to see something different. And all you're doing is being selfishly, Mike or Danielle, doing your best thing. And that's how we help everybody else awaken.
Yeah. Well, this is almost full circle to that doctor conversation, right? When those conversations start happening, or a doctor is to start walking that path, of course, others are curious, right? And I know you've seen the same in your journey. I've seen the same. Is when we start to have these conversations, it's, we get the behind the scenes messages. We start to have people reach out, or it can happen on the street or anywhere. These conversations start to arise out of places that are the least you would expect them to come from. But of course, they're coming forward just as they should, right? When we step into this space. So it's super powerful.
I think too, one of the hardest things to comprehend as the physical human being, which has an ego mind, the hardest thing I think to comprehend is that everything is already divinely in plan. And yes, we are here on planet Earth to have free will and experience free will, which is why we have duality. But ultimately, you are here for a purpose, and honest people you're meeting is not an accident. The experience you're in are not an accident. But how can you get your mind to wrap around that? Because when I meet people now, I immediately am like, oh my God, I cannot wait to see what unfolds here, because I know that I'm meeting this person for a reason, positive or negative. Exactly.
Yes. That's
great.
Hard
for people to understand.
That's such a cool perspective, because if you have that state of mind, it just makes your interactions an adventure each time.
Totally.
Right? You're just like, is this one going to go this way, or is it going to go this way? And at the same time, if it's something negative, you're not going to take it personally, because you already have, that objective view of, no, we are just connecting. We're crossing paths to teach one another something, or to have an experience together, whether that be good or bad. Let's walk away smiling, right? And so I love that. That's a super special perspective.
And if anyone wants to really ground themselves in accessing higher states of consciousness, or anchoring in a spiritual aspect of them quicker, it's living that way. Mm-hmm. You don't need to meditate and do the chakra stuff and do all the books. If you just start looking at life as it's happening for you and extracting what you're supposed to extract, positive or negative, you will naturally rise and ascend.
Yeah, just looking at everything as teachings, one way or another.
Everything.
Yeah.
And the negative things are where the most growth energetically happens, because those are your lessons to learn. That's your soul contract to learn. Whereas if I'm helping somebody and I'm not receiving the lesson or the growth moment, I'm not ascending as greatly as that other person, because it was for them, not me. I just facilitated it. Whereas if it's the opposite, where if I'm the one getting the lesson, it's my turn to ascend.
Yes. No, that's a great message as well, because we look at all the moments in life and every day, and the little things, somebody flipping us the bird driving, someone, us getting frustrated doing any small thing, or impatient with our kids, or all of these little things. If we're just to look at them as lessons and teachings, then we don't have that reactive state anymore. Exactly.
But also remembering that the reactive state doesn't go away, because the ego is forever there. And that's why having observation and awareness on the ego is the most important thing, because it doesn't ever go away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always knocking on our door.
Mm-hmm. And the lessons are little. Lines. Yeah, and the lessons are little. Like, I learned a lesson today with you on a podcast, which I obviously haven't shared with you, but I actually had an experience earlier today that wasn't very comfortable for me and challenged me greatly. And I was thinking in my mind, oh man, I should really reach out to Mike and say, hey, can we just do some breath work and get grounded before this thing? And I didn't. And I needed it. And then we had massive technical problems. And honestly, in that moment, I was like, this is me. This is me. Like, this is totally me and my vibe and my energy. And then I said, because in my mind, I'm like, this is happening for me. So how do I help him? And I was like, let's get on another platform, because that was me trying to shift my vibe. And then you came to me, your higher self came to me and said, let's open up with breaths, right? In that moment that you presented that, after you not knowing that that's what I was actually seeking, I took the lesson and went, why didn't you ask him for what you needed?
Totally. Right? Yeah.
How crazy.
Yeah. That's too funny. And it is even funnier that, because before each podcast, I do a little bit of breathwork and meditation anyways. So I could have easily just patched you in and we could have done that. But I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. That's why I was like, well, how do I help him? Because it's actually my vibe that's creating this. And I knew that because I was already in that state, but I didn't ask for the support I needed. And I think that's what's
Yes.
important for people to hear too, is like, especially in the spiritual conversation, the people that you're reaching out to in the spiritual conversation are not here to judge you. And if they are, they're not your people.
Yeah.
And like, you should never feel afraid of talking to someone about this in this community. And if you do, I encourage you to just look at why you're afraid. If you're truly afraid of judgment, I'm here to tell you that you won't be met with judgment. You actually will not be met with judgment. You will be received.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I couldn't agree more on that, because, you know, my journey's not too long ago, and I went through that same thing, and I can tell you it's been nothing but warmth. And of course, we put up all these walls of what's so-and-so going to think? What are these guys going to think? What am my old drinking buddies going to think? Doesn't matter in the first place. But the second place is, you know, they're either going to fade into the background, or they're going to stand up and beside you, or they're going to ask questions, right? And all of the above are acceptable and okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great.
Yeah. So there we go. The lessons are always there, because that's what it is. And that's, I saw you put a video out today about manifestation. That is also that part of that conversation of manifestation, right? When we talk about everything is divinely happening for us, when we have a desire to manifest, it's for a reason, because there's something trying to come towards us. That's why we feel like we want to manifest something, because our higher self is wanting to deliver a greater experience. But you have to meet it with action. You have to meet it with a higher version of yourself. And that's where everyone's falling short.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's been around for a long time, of course, but I think the energy game, or at least more awareness of it, is absolutely new, right? And people being open to it. We're seeing it happen, but it's there's so many misconceptions around affirmations and manifestation. Right. It's just like, cool. If I say I'm going to be a millionaire enough times, it's just going to show up in my bank. No, it's not.
No, it's not. Well, okay, that's not true. Let me stop you. Okay, it is true.
Yeah.
It absolutely is true. Okay, it is true. The reason that makes it happen is the vibration of your energetic state has to shift. That is the hardest thing to shift. And that's the thing that takes the work. If someone honestly were to sit there and be able to elevate their vibration enough to a state that they could call that in, they absolutely could manifest that. But the amount of effort and awareness and time it would take you to actually make that happen, it would be lifetimes. Right? And so, yes, it can happen, but it's not just happening. It's happening because you raised your vibration to become a match for that. And so what are you doing to raise your vibration?
Yeah, it's a chain reaction of thought to action, and everything that follows and in between. Yeah.
Because successful people that people respect, that do use law of attraction and manifestation and do call in $1 million deals for their businesses, but they're already operating in $1 million businesses. They're already a match for that energy. So that's why they're able to receive it.
Totally. And they're not going from a space of never playing in the energy space and then automatically jumping in, and that's the first thing they do and it's happening. It's a practice they've built up over time, and they've gotten to that level.
Yeah. I'm glad we touched on that a little bit, because a lot of people are in this space and they want it, but have it. You can have all of that law of attraction and manifestation. It does exist. But if you don't understand the energy and the energetics, it is completely irrelevant.
Yeah. So this is kind of coming full circle again to where we started in bringing this, you know, and two worlds colliding of the entrepreneurial or business space. So how do you introduce that, you know, to an entrepreneur that's always played in the space of, you know, calls equal emails, equal sales, equal so on and so forth. And sure, maybe they're in the self-help and development space and found some clarity there, but never touched on the energy space.
The first thing I ask are limitations. I start asking, where are your limitations in that process? And I'm from the sales world and the corporate world. Where are your limitations? And because that is not a normal question. So from an energy perspective, that disrupts the energy right away. They don't know that that's happening. But it's just like, hey, like, what are your limitations in this process? And what do your actions look like? And how do you feel when you take those actions? That's the linear conversation to transcend into the energetic conversation.
Okay. So you're pulling it out of them. You're prompting them and allowing them to say where their blocks are.
Yep. And then because everything is energy and we can feel it, once they share their limitations, they share their vibe, they share their actions, you pull one out that you know is low vibe or isn't working for them, and you present it back to them and they feel it and they go, oh shit, okay, I haven't seen that before. You're like, okay, now let me show you all these other things I can show you in this one conversation.
Cool. How many people have you seen put up a massive wall to that conversation in the beginning versus step into it?
There is not one person who has openly stepped into that conversation.
Yeah.
Because the ego always presents first. So that's
Right.
not a real conversation to say someone just streamlines right into it. It's not real.
Yeah.
Right. You have to go through the ego who pulls through the subconscious, then you can go through it.
So there's an introduction, a digestion period, and then it's a slow and steady step into the space.
Yeah. And some people stay in those first two phases that you talked about for years, lifetimes, really. Like they think they're awake. Lots of people think they're spiritually awakened, but now that we have another level of consciousness available to us, you're almost not. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, sure, you get it, but you get the linear spiritual stuff. And now you have to awaken and find that next level. Right.
And what kind of, some of the successes that you must see in people that you're guiding that are accepting stepping into this space must be pretty exciting.
It's really exciting because you witness them move through the ego. You witness them surrender to an aspect of us who has so much control over our lives that you're just like, you witness the shift of the energy based on their results. And you're just like, holy man, they shifted that heavy energy. I'll give you an example. I had a desire when I first started my business to work with professional athletes because I was like, I could probably take someone who has a desire and like get them to that level, like through energy work and consciousness and like exploring limitation. Like I could do that. And of course, the universe brought me somebody who was a border cross athlete, who was the underdog, and Kennedy Houston in, and she was nobody. And when I met her, we were servers, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go try to be an Olympic medalist in border cross." And I was like, "You're going to go try to do that? Like, what's your experience, right?" None. She had zero. So I took her from a full ego, complete experience. And for the first 2 seasons, we lost. We sucked. We weren't very good. But we showed up every day and we challenged the ego. And through that, I witnessed the shift of her energy. And last year, she was like on the podiums within 3 years. Right?
Amazing.
Yeah, like just crazy. But I witnessed the limitation. I witnessed her keep showing up. I witnessed the time she surrendered to the ego bullshit she was listening to. And then I watched her higher self support her into the next place. And that is such a rewarding place. And I see it time and time again with people I work with, not just an athlete.
Yeah. I can imagine. That's incredible. So there was just fight, and then step up.
Yeah. And as a coach or a mentor, you're trying to act as someone's higher self to pull them up to a higher space. But meanwhile, you're their punching bag because they're still in their ego. And you have to spiritually stand in a place of still seeing their higher self when they're beating you up verbally. And you're just like, but I see your higher self, like, come on. So I think to that conversation too, though, is you have to believe in yourself. You have to be willing to know that that's what the experience is like, or you get down on yourself. You beat yourself up. You think you're not good enough or it's not working. Right.
Yeah. We could go down somewhere there with about pain in the journey for sure.
It's real.
But, what does come to mind on that piece for me is because you do all this work with other individuals, how do you continually support yourself?
Yeah. I prioritize myself first and foremost. I'm number one. My clients are not number one. I'm number one. And what that looks like is I do my meditations. I ground myself. I do reflections. I do journaling is what reflections is. I feel into when I have a disconnecting energy or when I'm feeling too much into someone's low vibrational state, and I'll stop what I'm doing, again, prioritize myself and go, what do I need right now? Do I need to journal this out and have a conversation with myself? Do I need to have a closed-eyed meditation? Do I need to go tap into nature because nature is high vibrational energies? So what I do is I always prioritize myself. I'm always tapped into how I'm feeling. And the minute I feel out of vibe with myself, I stop what I'm doing and I prioritize myself, my energy, and bring it back in. But another thing I'll share on here is one of the things I found most powerful as someone who works in other people's energy that has served me greatly. Envisioning a gold egg around yourself and consistently. And if you are finding like you're losing your energy to somebody, you envision that gold egg around you and you feel for the leak. You feel where in your this egg around you is the leak that's pulling. And just visually in your mind's eye, you go to that space around you and you close it. And so I will often find myself every couple of weeks in a meditation where I'm just vibing with visualizing a very powerful, light around me or whatever I want, ball around me. And that's my energy. And I receive people's energy, but their energy doesn't come into that ball. So I literally I visualize it. I create a barrier energetically that doesn't allow people in. And when I'm weak and when I don't prioritize myself, that's when I get leaks. That's when people's energy comes in because I'm not prioritizing myself.
Wow. I love that. So you're creating a protective space around your energy, essentially.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm aware of when I'm not connected with my energy because I'm in a leak. I'm experiencing someone else's energy. And that's when I know, you're not doing the stuff you're supposed to be doing for what your soul needs.
Yeah. It's funny sometimes, right? How we have all the tools at our disposal. And even if we're helping others and guiding them how to leverage the tools, sometimes we forget to use them ourselves. And I know it all too well as well. It happened a couple of weeks ago when I had to check myself and I was just getting in that space of frustration, of tired, but I'm getting my sleep, all of the above. And I was just observed. And I said, Mike, have you been journaling? Have you been reflecting? Have you been sitting down and clearing your mind? Nope. And I think within, 2-3 hours before I went to bed, I did some work and listened to some good music and I woke up absolutely game changed, right? And it's just, I think you brought up another very important point on that. And though it may seem obvious to some, it's certainly not to others. And that is holding ourselves as number one. And that's, even if we have a family, even if we have a spouse that we love, we cannot be good for anybody if we're not good for ourselves. And so many people, look at that and they're like, oh, I shouldn't go do this. I have this planned or this. But if you're out of alignment and you're in that space and not able to heal and not able to just rest or whatever the body or your mind is asking of you, we're no good to anybody else. So I love hearing that come up because I feel it's a huge gap in the human space today, and we know how much it can serve you to help you serve others.
The only reason why we believe that we're not allowed to do that is because we've been separated between conscious energy and the ego doesn't believe it should be number one. Right? We've been separated. That's the human experience. That's why we have ego. And so our ego believes that we shouldn't be number one. And that's what we have to surrender to in order for us to be okay with making us number one. Right?
Yes.
It doesn't make you any less than of a person. It makes you a better person, a better parent, a better whatever, being number one. But the ego is never going to believe that to be true.
It does. I agree. Acknowledging that we need that and fighting through the ego telling us, no, you should go help that person or your energy should be there. But in turn, if we take that time and that space, we become superhuman for that other person instead of half human, right?
Only if you take that time, though. I think a lot of people selfishly take the time in the wrong reason that don't benefit them. And that's why we have a stigma in society that kind of says that we shouldn't do that, because it's like, you just want to take the weekend off and go on a men's retreat and get drunk. Well, I have to take care of the kids. And it's like, no, I want to go to a men's retreat so I can become a better dad and a better father and a better husband, a better everything. That's what I want to do. But I think a lot of people haven't done that. And that's why we live in the society belief that we just talked about.
Yeah, that's massive. And I mean, of course, there's a space there too that people shouldn't misconstrue time with themselves, drinking a 6-pack of beer on their porch, right? That's not going to make you better for other people, even though it's time by yourself. Right?
I want to clarify that, right?
Well, it's important, unfortunately, right? That because we all can define that time by ourselves differently, and time by yourself and creating those healthy habits is what it's about, is taking that time to read or to sit in the grass and do nothing. But things that serve us so that we can create the space internally and turn space for others.
Yeah, totally. I love where this conversation went today. I know that this was such a dimensional and dynamic conversation that anyone listening to this could catch something on whatever wave they were on today. So I appreciate you for allowing that to unfold.
And likewise, I can tell you that, any podcast prior to jumping on, I'd at least do, a couple questions, but I knew jumping on today, I had no desire even to do so because I knew this is exactly how everything was going to unfold. So I always appreciate when we can align our energies and have these great conversations. And I do have 2 final structured questions that we do put to every guest at the end. So, the one is, what would your personal definition of a conscious creator be, or conscious living? And how does that relate to your life?
Yeah, I like that question. The way I define being a conscious creator, again, going back to prioritizing myself, is me being the best version of myself and defining that version to be someone that supports and facilitates the collective, meaning let me hold the door for that person. Let me take that photo of that couple. Let me tell someone something that they don't want to hear. Let me look at every experience for what it is. And I believe that when I allow myself to just be that and be the best version of myself and see everything through a very neutral lens, I am being the best conscious aspect of myself. And through that, you create from that space anyways. And so my definition really is, again, being the best version of me, truly. Yes. And not just saying that, like actually challenging the things that don't serve me, like looking at the things that that I know I need to change and actively change them. It's not just saying like, I prioritize myself. It's actually doing the work is what a conscious creator is.
Yes, I love that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more is, if you were to give your younger self at any age one piece of advice with the knowledge that you have today, what would that be?
You already knew where you were going the whole time.
Powerful.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Goes back to everything's in divine timing. You already knew where you were going the whole time.
Yes. I love that. That's probably the best answer to date.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, we've had some good ones. So
they're all great, really.
Yep. All of them are just as they're supposed to be. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it and appreciate you. And before we go, I do want to let anybody listening today or watching know where they can continue to find, more Danielle Grant and continue to follow your journey.
Love it. Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show, Mike. For anyone that wants to follow me, 2 different ways. Number one is you can follow me, Danielle Grant, the Beautiful Human and Beautiful Soul, on LinkedIn or on my podcast, the Mind Vibe Podcast. As well, I have a publication called Awake Ascending, awakeascending.com. And then if you want to come to the spiritual side, into my company, The Spiritual Room, you can head to thespiritualroom.co, or you can check out the Spiritual Show podcast. And both of those podcasts on any major platform. And obviously throughout all that, there's ways that you can communicate to me beyond just consuming.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for having me.
Thank you. If today's episode resonated with you in any way, or you feel it added value to your day, please feel free to share it with friends. And of course, link and subscribe so that you can be alerted for future episodes. We sincerely appreciate you watching, and always remember to learn, laugh, and love. Until next time.